Hello, everyone. Happy Saturday. Welcome back to the Pain in Your Assets podcast with Stella Bee on air. We are still recording live here at the Indiana Black Expo at the Indiana Convention Center here in Indianapolis. Recording season 2, now on episode 4 of the Pain in Your Assets podcast. I am Stella Bee on air, and we are asking the question. And today we are asking the question, how do you handle the finances in your marriage or if you have a live-in relationship? So it can also apply for couples who may not live together, but as my grandma Medea used to say, you don't really know a book until you live with them. So I kind of agree with that. I guess you can still learn as much as you can about a person, but and I kind of agree with that. You kind of have to live with a person. We're all a little different when the hair and makeup and our attire comes off. Men may not have hair and makeup per se, but they do have beards. And I recall during the pandemic where some of the guys would go live. I recall during the pandemic when some of the guys would go live because I think the barbershops were closed back then. So you would see how your person would look if they had to go a few days, weeks, months without getting a haircut, without getting that clean shave, without getting the hair dye. Some guys get their hair dyed and their beard dyed as well. So not having access to that constant grooming, you see the real them. And we saw the real them of some of the fellas too. I know they like to tease us sometimes about how we look without our makeup, without our weave, without our lashes. Even though I'm not a big lashes person, I tried to wear lashes once, and I think my real eyelashes went into a protest mode because after I took them off, they were going in like all different directions. So I haven't worn any since then, but yeah, we're all, the way we look in our natural state. There are some men who their skin is so perfect, it's just disrespectful. And the same with women. But that's not the case for all of us. And also the same for our hair. I personally have pretty decent hair under all of this, but I prefer to wear this. Maybe just the lazy part of me, it's easier to maintain. Once this gets frizzes, I can always toss this and buy another one. I'm too cheap to buy the super expensive hair because I change it a lot. And so my daughter, she always says, but you can wash that and you can flat iron it and curl it. I'm like, well, if I'm going to do all that, I might as well just do all that to my real hair. I'm still doing all the same work. That's the whole point of me getting something that's already ready. I can just throw it on, pop it off the next day because I don't like to sleep in it. I like to have my head free. So the convenience of having fresh, prepared hair the next day without having to do all the work is what I'm looking for. But again, getting back to my original point, some of the guys, they were looking a little scruffy, especially the ones who are bald or balding and are not savvy enough to do their own shaving. Like you had some George Jeffersons going on. You had some George Jeffersons going on, and some men also get their eyebrows arched, well maybe not arched, but they get them trimmed so that they're not looking like Bigfoot. Along with a guy, having his eyebrows looking fairly decent. The nails and the manicure and pedicure as well. There's nothing wrong with having a man laying next to you and his feet are not scratching your legs up. I mean, we women have a lot more grooming, I would think, to do because we shave. For those who shave our legs and so forth, unless you've had the laser hair removal, which I recently did, and that's interesting to go through that process. It was fairly, I would say 99%, 90% successful, but you can go back and get additional treatments too to make sure there's 100%. If you're not consistent with the shaving for women, then yeah, you may have that little fuzz that comes on, your legs, and he's feeling like he's laying next to Bigfoot. So it was interesting to see some of the women and men in their semi-natural states during those times. For those who weren't savvy enough to maintain their own grooming techniques. Getting back to the topic of we're talking about handling finances, and I saw a video online where Steve Harvey was admonishing couples, and he stated every couple should have 4 bank accounts. A checking account that covers all of your monthly fixed costs and some variable expenses. It pays everything that's a necessity to live. A savings account where you both agree to deposit a certain amount of dollars in it each month, and it takes 2 signatures to withdraw from that account. One partner has their own bank account, that's number 3, and then number 4 would be the other partner having their own bank account. She can do whatever she want to do. She ain't got to check in with you and ask. He can do whatever he want to do without checking in with her. And so that made a lot of sense to me. And I respect his points. As I mentioned, my former marriage, we were attending a church where the ministry encouraged us to have one bank account because they were very restrictive with, but also what the married people did as well. I mean, they were all the way in our bedroom, like almost like literally. But they were in the finances as well. If you didn't pay your tithes, you would get stood up in church and called out because they kept a record of who was working, who was not, almost like what you were making because they kind of knew where you were, what your profession was. So when they look at those books, especially if you were someone that had a position like me, I was one of the singers. I would have gotten sat down if I didn't pay my tithes. So I was very consistent with that. However, if you're not working, you weren't required to pay it. But yes, if you had income, then yes, you were required to pay it. But even outside of the finances, they were very restrictive in what you could or couldn't do as a single and as a married couple. And in the finances, we were encouraged to have one bank account. That is a way to have accountability, but it takes trust. So encourage oneness in addition to accountability, because if everything is going into one pot, you have one place to look to see what's going in and what's going out. But it takes to have both parties to be financially responsible in order for that to work. So eventually, once we transitioned out of that ministry, I had to get us back to the 4 bank accounts that Steve Harvey mentioned, because unfortunately my partner was not as financially responsible as I was, believe it or not. I still have a lot I had a lot of learning to do back then, but I still have more learning to do now on a business side of things. But I did at least have enough sense to know that I need to take care of all of my bills that are required to be paid first before I get my hair and nails done. That you have some people that were reared in an environment, they're like, I'm not going to deny myself. If I want to get that dress, I'm going to get that dress. And then I'm just going to have to ask Auntie Sue to give me the money to pay my light bill. I wasn't raised in that environment. Thankfully I have a biological father and a stepfather who were very responsible in making sure that our households were taken care of. They paid the bills. And my mom also worked. So, and I haven't had as much business savvy as some others who invested a whole lot more in the stock market and learned about the LLCs and the corporations, which I'll talk about later in this season, in this episode. But I did at least know that you should at least cover your rent and your utilities before getting your hair and nails done. And by him being a former music producer, he could come in with a keyboard one day, and I'm like, where's your other half of the mortgage? Or just being diligent and making sure that the bank account didn't go negative, because those NSL fees can add up. Before you know it, that would be that could be the ComEd bill right there. We use the money because it's still going through, because all of your bank accounts don't always have that discretion to say to deny your card if the funds are not there. They'll just let it go through, and then you'll pay the consequences later. And that was the case for us a lot. And he's thinking, well, the card, the transaction process, so I'm thinking the money is there. Like, no, you have to check the balance. Make sure that, and then especially if it's right before a bill is due. So now I have to get a late fee on that and pay it the next pay period, because the funds that I had set aside to pay that bill is not there anymore. Unless I had some savings that I could tap into to transfer over into the checking account to cover that bill, which I hated to do. I really don't like to tap into my savings, but sometimes you got to do that, and then just kind of replenish the savings once you get paid again. And so yeah, he wasn't as extremely savvy when it came to making sure that we had enough funds, because he was supposed to dedicate a certain amount. After we transitioned into having separate accounts, we didn't go into 4 right away. I think we had 2, maybe 3. And he was supposed to put a certain amount into our joint account that we initially started with, to make sure that we had enough in that pot to cover all the expenses. And then we had our own separate accounts after that. That was still a challenge, because there was times when he would not put all of his part in, because he may have wanted to get that Guitar Center piece, some he needed to have for his studio. Unless it's set up automatically to go into that joint account, relying on your other person that may not be as financially responsible as you is a challenge. So now, when I deal with, if I have any of my kids or someone that I'm working with that I know is not as savvy, it has to be automatic. So they don't have to think about it. It comes out as soon as they get paid, and it goes right into our joint account that pays all of our bills before they touch it. And then sometimes you can have it where individuals take care of certain bills, so that instead of all the bills coming from one account, they deal with this bill, you deal with that bill, but still have it where it's paid automatically if they are not as financially responsible to make sure that it gets paid. So that is definitely helpful to have that put in place. So it also takes trust, because you know what that person is putting in the account, and you know what they're taking out of it. And so you know if that person is kind of being a little sneaky on the side, you can't just dip off and get a hotel fee and put that in your joint account and put that on your debit card from your joint account. They could be like, what is this? Or you have a large sum of a cash withdrawal all of a sudden. What was this for? So it takes, that's where the accountability comes in to when you have that joint account. And I think that's what the ministry was kind of getting at as to why they wanted us to have that joint account for the accountability and oneness. But it's really hard when you have someone that is just not as financially savvy as you are. A lot on the business side, and so in doing further research myself, I've learned about how you can use the credit game to establish business credits. You can use, and then it also helps with your liability too. If you are someone that has a business, in addition to having your own personal finances, you want to separate those two and not mingle into which accounts you dip out of. Costs versus personal costs. Further, another thing that I'm also still working on is I think I heard one of the hip hop artists mention, stop putting everything in your name. And I'm like, well, if you don't put it in your name, how are you going to build your brand? So I guess they're building their brand more on a social media, financial, maybe website, but in terms of businesses, they're not putting all the businesses in their name. That's to protect themselves from creditors, protect themselves from family, protect themselves from anyone else who may want to leech on a person that they feel has a substantial amount of resources and finances that they may want to say, hey, I want some dibs on that. Establishing an LLC or a C Corp, limited liability corporation, it gives yourself the business security and liability protection. And even deeper than that, you can create a trust. And so the trust can run the C Corp, and then the C Corp can run the LLC. I mean, it's so many levels to this that by the time a creditor or anyone or a family member or someone that may potentially want to come after you, by the time they dig, they have no idea who owns what. And they have to really do some search to get to your assets. I guess you can just do whatever you need to do with that information and take it or leave it. But I'm sure for those who are up in the income bracket would need to have some kind of levels of asset protection. There's another aspect of financial responsibility. My mom actually introduced me to this gentleman, attorney, author, radio host, Ernest B. Fenton. Because my mom is a retired real estate professional. She did real estate probably for about 25 plus years. After working at a bank as a teller. And I mentioned her story and her influence on my career choice in my first book, in my Why chapter in the Grants and Subcontract Compliance book. So after being a bank teller, she transitioned into being a real estate salesperson. And being in real estate, you're going to have a lot of clients and partnerships because you need to have real estate attorney to close your deals. You need to have mortgage brokers for your clients to get loans. You need to know who the property inspectors are and appraisers, and we have a handyman that she connected with, who was a handyman to the broker that she took her class to get her real estate license. He owned a big multi-unit building, and the person that worked for him, the maintenance guy, is still to this day my mom's handyman person. So if she needs anything done around her house, from cleaning her stove to cleaning her carpet or whatever it is, she calls him. and I've used him also for some tasks in my home. And so you kind of build those kind of connections when you're in that profession where you deal with other entrepreneurs who are provide services in your industry. And so attorney, author, radio host Ernest B. Fenton, he has a new book out actually on business and estate planning with a subtitle, Your Level Up Guide to Asset Protection, Trust, and Estate Planning. And he talks about separating your personal income and expenses from your business.